Welcome to Breakfast Club. My name is Mandla Tshuma, and today we are discussing challenges facing consumers and businesses in Bulawayo in the deepening economic crisis. And in the studio today, I'm joined by Mr. Muchekeza, who is the Matebeleland Regional Manager for the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, CCZ. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Mandla.
Thank you. I'm also joined in the studio by Mr. Brighton Ncube, who is the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, ZNCC, chairperson for the Bulawayo Chapter. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. To kickstart the program, I'll start with you, Mr. Muchekeza. Can you tell us what's the mandate of ZNCC, of Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, CCZ?
Yes, the mandate of the CCZ, the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, is to protect consumers. Then how do you protect consumers? We have programs which we do in order to protect consumers. First and foremost is consumer education. As Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, we believed an informed consumer is a protected consumer. So consumer education comes top on our programs. We also advocate for consumer protective legislations. Like currently, there is the Consumer Protection Bill, which is being debated in Parliament. I think as we are talking, what's left is that for the President to pay this signature. So we also advocate for consumer protective legislations. Over the years, there are so many pieces of legislations which the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe advocated for. You might think of the Consumer Contract Act. You might also talk about the Small Claims Court Act. There are quite a number.
Thank you so much for that. Then to you, Mr. Ncube, what's the mandate of the ZNCC? What do you do as ZNCC?
ZNCC is, in short, the voice of business. We represent the business community. Our membership it cuts across all sectors of the economy. We have got almost all the sectors of the economy represented in our membership. We are primarily involved in lobbying and also in advocacy. We represent business even in engagement with government, with even other stakeholders. So in the long and short of it is that we are the voice of business.
Thank you, voice of business. Back to you, Mr. Muchekeza. We realize that things are not all right in the economy. Prices have been going up. Everything has just been going up. The cost of electricity, the cost of everything really has been going up. Maybe to start with the bread basket. How much now is the bread basket for the consumer? For a family of 6. Right?
The bread basket for a family of 6, we are talking of close to 3,000 bonds. You will note that currently we are doing that on a weekly basis, because prices are also going up on a weekly basis. Over the years, we used to say for the month of January, for the month of February, but it's no longer the same. You'll find that the price for today might be different for tomorrow's prices. So that's why I just give an approximation of around 3,000. The last time it was 2,700. Yes.
So if I got you right, you're now calculating it almost every day or every week?
Every week.
Okay.
Every week.
So now that it is at 3,000, what does it mean for the consumer in terms of their buying power?
Consumer buying powers have been eroded. Possibly that's where also the element of consumer education comes in. Consumers still have the same number of days to live a month. If last month 3,000 was enough for them for 30 days, and if it's no longer enough, the number of days remains the same, but the amount has changed. So then consumers come up with strategies to say how they need to stretch the little we have to cover the number of days in a month.
Maybe back to you, Mr. Ncube. Consumers are your customers.
Yes.
So do you identify with what Mr. Muchekeza is saying, that the buying power of the consumers is getting eroded each and every day?
It's very true. The domestic demand has been falling very steeply, largely because of the low disposable incomes. And that does really affect the bottom line in terms of business. You're not moving the sales as you used to. You are not getting, maybe you're also not being able to match up with what your cost of doing business also is getting you to. So we are definitely feeling the impact of low disposable incomes and the falling demand.
So you are also affected?
We are greatly affected. A business doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in an environment, and whenever there are challenges in an environment, we are not spared.
Back to you, Mr. Muchekeza. What are some of the challenges that they are facing the consumer today? Just leave the bread basket for now.
The challenges which consumers face, you will note that in an economy like this, there is an element of shortage of some products. When you see fuel queues everywhere, it's an indication that the product is in short supply. And when products become scarce, prices normally tends to go up. Besides that, the quality of the product themselves, they are compromised. Once one knows that the consumers will buy because the product is in short supply, there is no more competition in terms of quality of a product because it's of its scarcity. Quality is also compromised on the production cost. Currently, a loaf of bread is going for around $15.75 as of yesterday. You then note that there are others who are then producing substandard loaves and they're going for $12. That same loaf might be substandard to the detriment of the consumer health. So those are some of the challenges which consumers face.
Maybe on the quality of the products that the business is offering to consumers, what is your take on that? Consumers are complaining that they are substandard.
Yes, I think you have to appreciate that our economy is a liberalized economy. Consumers have the right of choice. Likewise, the manufacturers of the business at large, there are those who are going to give you a product of quality. It will also match with the price. We always advise our members, they are supposed to operate, they're supposed to be certified. They've got certification in terms of standards. So for those who make substandard, there are so many reasons around it. But it's a challenge as well because it's unfair competition within business as it were, because there are others who pay to make sure that they comply with certain standards. We've got the Standards Association of Zimbabwe, which does test products for quality. So in instances where you have got substandard products for someone who's trying to survive, I would want to believe one of the reasons why you would want to make a substandard product is because you are compromising, you are trying to survive in this harsh business climate. So for others, I think it's survival tactics. I cannot dispute the fact that they are substandard products, definitely, but the issue of the consumer being able to choose. When you go for cheap, everything else is cheap. When you go for what is standard, the price will say so as well.
I understand that as businesses, you also have challenges. It's not only the consumers who have challenges in this economy.
Yes.
What are some of your challenges?
Business is facing challenges in terms of cost of production, the cost of doing business. We are faced right now, the biggest challenge that is there is you have rising utility costs. You have got load shedding. Some businesses are actually running on generators. You can't have a generator economy. Obviously, the cost of getting fuel to run a generator for 18 hours will reflect on the price that will be on the shelf for the consumer. At the same time, remember, you get into business because you want to make a profit. You still want to maintain the whole objective why you are in business. So the challenge that we have are power problems, fuel, electricity. We've also got issues to do with the regulatory environment. The environment requires a lot of compliance work. There's a lot of regulatory intervention in the running of businesses. And therefore, all that is an expense which is eventually passed to a consumer. And that is a challenge. No one likes to produce something that sits on the shelf that doesn't move. No one wants to produce something that is too expensive. You don't want to price yourself out of business. So we have all these challenges. We've got challenges as well with our employees, the workers themselves. Remember, that same consumer is a worker, is an employee, is employed by a business person. That challenge of eroded incomes, that wage inflation affects us as well in business.
Thank you. Mr. Muchekeza, when we talk about the consumer, who exactly are we talking about? Is everyone a consumer? Who is the consumer?
That's a good question. When we talk about the consumer,
Yes.
we talk about even my friend here. He runs a business, but outside business he's a consumer. We are talking of every human being being a consumer. So you'll note that the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe represents everyone, even the businessman. Once he gets out of the shoes of his business, he then become a consumer and seeks consumer protection from the Consumer Council.
No, thank you for that. Maybe now looking at the challenges that you have to do with the cash shortages, this and that, how has that affected the day-to-day runnings of a consumer?
Yes, the issue of cash shortage has really affected the day-to-day running of a consumer. In the sense that you go in the streets, the bread which we are saying is going for $15.75 in the shops. You get it for $12 in the streets, but they will want cash. One also wonders the health aspect, the cleanliness of the environment where that bread is being stored. It's all because of shortages of cash. Had it been that there was enough cash in the banks, I think even our prices could not have been as high as they are. You get in some instances, you find that there is a three-type prices. There's a cash price, there is the RTGS price, there is a mobile money transfer price. All those are indication that the shortage of cash affects consumers.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ncube, back to you again.
Yes.
How is the challenge of cash affecting you? Maybe you can also explain this situation whereby the prices are in 3 tiers. Cash, RTGS, this and that. How does that come into play?
The cash problems themselves are what you find in terms of the multi-tier pricing is basically a symptom of an underlying problem, which is basically the shortage of foreign currency in the economy. These are means that are being devised by others to find ways of surviving. ZNCC membership is a regulated membership, so it will be difficult for me to talk about the ones that are outside the regulatory aspect in terms of being controlled. But if you go to a registered and a properly regulated business, they should give you a unison price, a price that whether you are paying in cash, whether you are swiping, whether you are paying in cash. I'm talking about a regulated business. Well, we know they have always those instances. But the issue is that when we're a consumer economy, where our production has dropped. Right now, industry, the capacity utilization is actually below 20%. So others have to get critical space to ensure production. Other raw materials have to be procured have to be imported. So the unavailability of foreign currency is the one that is driving others to start having this multi-tier pricing. It's the cost, it's the premium that people have to pay in order to obtain the critical foreign currency for them to secure or to procure what they need for their business to run. So definitely the cash shortages in the market are manifesting themselves in that manner.
Thank you. Now coming to the issue of power challenges, you find that some households go for over 18 hours without electricity, people are in darkness. How has that affected the consumer in managing their daily lives?
It has affected the consumer. To start with, there is no consumer if there is no business. There has to be a service provider so that the consumer is there. So at Consumer Council, we always say the consumer and the service providers are two equal partners. They need each other the same way. Consumers need business as much as business need consumers. So consumers, they do sympathize with the business. We will not want business to go away because that's why we get our services. The shortage of power, yes, it affects the consumers, but I think power should first be addressed to business. It will not make really much sense if the whole generators in Kariba, they run the whole day just to produce electricity for consumers to use as their lighting. It's even expensive. We want electricity for industry. As has been said before, we are now being turned into a market economy, which is why at times we see our prices so high. We don't produce for our own. If power is availed to business, they start producing, I think consumers will support that, even if it means that domestic consumers will be rationed in terms of power. Yes, we want electricity in our homes, but first and foremost, electricity should be used to benefit us. How do we benefit from electricity? We benefit from electricity if there is a functional industry where we say we can consume our own products.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ncube, as business, do you sympathize with the consumers in their plight?
Yes, like I said, our employees are consumers. So it actually creates a very big problem because we have to now, the labor issues that arise. That's the challenges that are being faced by business. There's that pressure now to increase wages. There's pressure to increase salaries because of the effects of the challenges that consumers are going through. And like he rightly put it, we are also consumers also. Like right now, we're consumers of the utility services that are being provided to business. So with that aspect of sympathy is there, that we need each other, it's a given. But I will touch on the issue of power as well. It's not just only the load shedding that is affecting us as business. It's also the hikes, the increases. Electricity was hiked by about 320%. And you can imagine industry uses power for almost 95% of their operations. I'm talking about power both in terms of electricity, also in terms of diesel, in terms of, for those in the logistics and transport business, for those who also have to use such a certain plant and equipment that uses oils and fuels. So you can imagine that impact that it has on the business in terms of the final product, in terms of also viability, in terms of also being able to give a product that is also that is affordable to the consumer. So it's a vicious cycle. We are not having enough power. At the same time, the leak that we get is now so expensive.
Okay, thank you. Now maybe we have touched something on transport industry. We realize that people are spending hours, Mr. Muchekeza, waiting for Zoom or buses to get to town or to travel to wherever they want to go. How has that affected their livelihood?
Yes, I think consumers have been greatly affected. Just imagine you spend 3 hours queuing. Those are 3 wasted hours. You're just standing in a queue. I think it's an indication also even to the combi operators to realize that the prices they are charging, while they could be realistic, but they are unaffordable to the consumers. No one would want to spend 3 hours in a queue while there is another combi which is shouting, inviting people to come. They should also learn to say, let's meet somewhere in between. They cut on their profit. We don't talk about operational cost, yes, but when it comes to that profit, to say, my operational cost is $1 and the profit is $3. Let's negotiate on this profit to say, why can't you cut on your profit margins? Consumers have been supporting the same businesses. It's not good to say overnight business start behaving as though they can do without consumers. The other issues which I think should also be addressed, at times it takes too long for the government and business to review their prices. And when they review, they want to backdate their reviews. Backdate in the sense to say, for the past 3 months, we're operating at below cost. The next 3 months, we would want to charge what would have been collected during the past 3 months. I think that affects, that's why we see prices going up so high. The issue of power, yes, we sympathize with the power utilities, but I think the percentage markups which are being charged both to consumers and business, they are not affordable.
Thank you for that. Mr. Ncube, those consumers will be spending 2 to 3 hours waiting for the Zuko buses, will be trying to get their way into town to come and work for you.
Yes.
So how has that affected you? Do we have workers that come report late for work? How is transport affected you?
It's actually something that has affected even the staff morale. You know, every business person is complaining now that, you know, because of the effects, the environment, your workers are not motivated. They are facing a lot of things. By the time they come to work, they're carrying all this baggage. If someone has to wake up at 4 a.m. to wait for a Zupco bus and still get to work at 9:30, and at the same time, they are expected to deliver, because remember, that doesn't take away the fact that month end they will have to be paid a salary. So obviously, that accommodation is difficult, but we are facing the same problem as well as business. I have to have my driver to go and queue for diesel to do deliveries. He will also spend another 6 hours in a fuel queue. So you will notice that this becomes a problem that is a ripple effect. That worker comes after spending 4 hours waiting to come to work, gets in there is a driver, has to go and queue again, spend another 5 hours in a fuel queue. If you look at it, that day is gone. And in terms of what we've produced, there is very little.
Thank you for that. Back to you, Mr. Muchekeza. We realize that the challenges that we're discussing today were not there maybe say two years ago. Yes, we have been in a multi-currency regime, but the challenges that we're discussing today were not as intense as they are today. Maybe from the consumer point of view, what went wrong? Where did we go wrong for the prices to start escalating, this and that?
Yeah, like what I said before, that at times the government took too long to make reviews. Where we went wrong, in 2009, when the multi-currency was introduced, a week before introduction of multi-currency, there was nothing in our pockets. A week later, everyone had US dollars. Business had US dollars, consumers had US dollars. I wonder if consumers ever wondered where that money was coming from and how sustainable was it. In terms of withdrawals, I remember those days, Stanbic, the maximum withdrawal a day was $3,000. People would not realize it because they had nothing like that. We're just going to withdraw your 100, but people never sat down to say, where is this money coming from? If you look at the level of importations, the Japanese cars were flooding all over. There were US dollars which were going. And we never even as a country sat down to say, do we have sufficient and enough reserves for these US dollars which we are churning out day in, day out? I think the government realized when their stocks were almost depleted. That's where we created our own problem. Had it been that by the time they introduced the multi-currency, they were supposed to create a way to stop leakages. I believe by then Zimbabwe was one of the 5 countries in the world which was trading in US dollars. People from Nigeria would deposit nairas and use their Visa card to withdraw US dollar in Zimbabwe. People from China would deposit their yens in China. They would come to Zimbabwe, use their Visa card to take US dollars. Even in South Africa, they would deposit their rands, send somebody with a Visa card to withdraw US dollars. All those leakages, no one ever thought of. We only realized when our stocks, there was nothing. So that's why we created our problem. Trying to come up with a bond note, yes, it was an idea, but it was a bit too late.
Back to you, Mr. Ncube. Where did things go wrong from a business point of view?
I think from the business point of view, when we moved to dollarization, there was people did not appreciate the value of the US dollar. The loans that business was getting from banks, that was very expensive money. The interest rates at that time were very expensive. So as time went on and when reality sank, that's when people realized that, you know, in US dollar terms, if you are paying an interest of about 25% per annum, that's a lot of money. And so eventually, the money was accessible, it was very easy to obtain. So business busy borrowing, everyone was borrowing. But you see, that was not matching the production part. So as time went on, people started struggling to pay back the loans because the money was expensive. And then there was a high rate of default, you know, and then we started having problems, people scaling down. We had problems in retrenchments. So all that now was just symptomatic of a problem of not putting systems in place to say how do we behave ourselves now that we're now trading in US dollar. I agree with him. At that time, there was that excitement that we've moved to dollarization. People were happy because things were looking like they're stabilizing. But that was always a simmering problem that was going to manifest later on. And this is where we are. And because forex was easily available, everyone was getting a loan, and businesses were buying expensive equipment, we're getting expensive money. And when push came to shove, we found ourselves having all these problems. And then obviously because of that, we started to come up with policies. The interventions that we're coming now, we're firefighting. That in itself now would exacerbate the problem. We create more problems by trying to solve another problem.
Thank you so much for that. Now maybe turning to the solutions. What solutions are there for such a situation? What would you suggest, Mr. Muchekeza?
Yes, solutions should be there, and solutions should be coming from the consumers, the business, the laborers, and the government. I think the parties should sit down and be open to one another. There should be a realistic and truthful dialogue where we say we have to do this. If we are to cut on certain issues, let it be universal. Everyone must feel the pinch. If you are to tighten our belts, let everyone be seen to be tightening the belt. If it goes that way, the issue of government spending, the issue of how the private sector is spending, the issue of consumers, it should be uniform. But if you realize that people are talking of tightening their belts, whilst the business which says they are not making profit are buying expensive cars, they are flying every day, it's another issue. Same applies to government. I think all parties should then say, we don't have money, this is what we have. Let's try to share what we have equally. Everyone will understand that situation and will sail through these challenges together.
Mr. Ncube, what are the solutions?
I think we just need to have clear timelines in terms of the policies that are being implemented right now that have resulted in the environment that we're in. The transitional stabilization program that government is pursuing, should have clear timelines so that people can understand for how long people are going to be in this environment, and also businesses can plan. And the other thing is, during that process, there must be safety nets for business, because you don't want to realign your economy. In the process, afterwards, you realize that after realigning, you no longer have business. So the solution must be that as you are implementing your austerity measures, put safety nets for business, protect the businesses that are the sort of you can have something to develop and to grow. And also the interventions must not mostly be regulatory in nature, but they must be developmental in nature. The policies must encourage growth and expansion, not to curtail certain practices and to stifle or constrain the business operating space.
Maybe finally on you again, is there any hope for the business in such an environment?
There is hope, because if what is being done is implemented in accordance to what has been explained, there is hope. And I believe we needed, the economy needed that shock treatment so that we could have a sane and stable environment.
Mr. Muchekeza, is there any hope for the consumer?
Yes, hope is there. Hope is there. I think what also need to be done from the leadership perspective, political leaders, from the ruling party, from the opposition, I think there should come a time where they say election mood is over. We now have to accept the reality and move on together. The idea where there will be election debates throughout until the next election, I think is also detrimental to our development. People will talk about the rigging of elections. Whether rigging or not, I'm not qualified to say that. But what we have seen over the years, we have never witnessed an election which was repeated, because people have protested and they are talking of demonstration and that. Ever since, we've never had a repeat of such. So people should also learn that if it's over, it's over. Let's move forward and strategize new ways of winning future elections. Then people concentrate on the bread and butter issues.
Thank you so much. Now what remains for me is to thank both of you for coming to this studio.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you. Today in the studio I was joined by Mr. Muchekeza, who is the regional manager for the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe, and Mr. Brighton, who is the chairman for the Bulawayo Chapter of the Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce, ZNCC, where we're discussing challenges facing the consumer and businesses here in Bulawayo. Thank you so much for watching.